There are disturbing new reports this morning about mental health and troop morale aboard the USS Lincoln in the Middle East. The aircraft carrier beat the modern-day record for most continuous days at sea without a port call. Families of sailors are telling MS Now they're worried about shortages of food and hygiene products, moldy showers, toilets that do not work, and broken laundry facilities. They say in a fiery town hall with Navy leaders last week, concerns were raised about the sailors' mental health and exhaustion. The military news outlet Stars and Stripes interviewed active duty sailors and family members who described at least one instance where a crew member had to be stopped from jumping overboard. The Navy released a statement saying in part, quote, "We have not observed an increase in suicidal ideations aboard the ship. We take every service member's well-being seriously and have medical and mental health professionals available to assess and address concerns as they arise." Joining me now, Priya, Sridhar, Pentagon reporter for MS Now. Kevin and Peter are still with us too. Priya, I'm going to start with you because you've been covering this story for days now. These concerns, these allegations, they are incredibly disturbing. Is anything being done about them at all?
Yeah, Antonia, I've been reporting about this over the last week or so, and the family members really wanted to raise the alarm bells that this record deployment is really taking a toll on their loved ones' mental health, and that they're concerned that this exhaustion with these long 14 to 16-hour ships with very little days off could lead to deadly accidents. And so there was an emergency town hall at Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego last Thursday evening with Acting Secretary of the Navy Hung Kao, where family members confronted him about their concerns, and they essentially were demanding answers about when the Lincoln could come home, or when there could be relief, as in another aircraft carrier could be sent into that area to relieve the Lincoln. And he basically told family members that they're planning on sending the USS Theodore Roosevelt, another aircraft carrier, in that direction, but he wasn't able to give them a definitive timeline on when that could happen or when the Lincoln is going to come home. And they also asked questions about these reports of a sailor going overboard. And he basically said to them that that sailor was back on the ship and that he was, quote unquote, fine. That comment was met with extreme anger by the audience, where they said he is not fine. So as you heard from the Navy right there, they're claiming that there's no uptick in suicidal ideations on the ship, but we're hearing a very different story from the family members themselves, Antonia.
Yeah, very, very different stories. Hard to imagine being told somebody's just fine after a description like the one that you laid out there. The thing is, Peter, the allegations about what's been unfolding on this ship, they go all the way back to April. Reports of food shortages then, concerns about morale and cleanliness then. There have been images at times shared around publicly, and Hegseth has dismissed it as fake news. So when you hear first fine, as you just heard Priya lay out there, and then see sort of the history of what Hegseth has said about this, what do you make of the Pentagon's handling of this? And if any of it is normal, if this is, I guess, just sort of par for the course and what happens during a conflict, a war like this one, or if this administration is being less transparent about the reality and the conditions troops are facing than other administrations have been in the past.
Yeah, look, the stress on the forces is significant. You're almost done with 6 months of constant warfare, or certainly constant deployment in the service of warfare in the Middle East. And a lot of these units have been away for an awful long time. They don't have the same rotation that they have in conflict situations. And the stress on real soldiers, real troops, real sailors, then trickles back to their families. They hear about it. It's a significant concern for the military community. Now, this is war, and a lot of people say you have to just do what you have to do. No question about it. But there is an expectation that during times of conflict, that the Pentagon is focused on the well-being of the force, and that they will respond accordingly. So we'll see how Hegseth handles this. Simply just brushing it off and pretending that it doesn't exist may not fly with people who see it in their daily lives or see it through their families. And I think that as this war continues without an obvious end in sight, and these deployments are going to continue, unrelieved for a while, there's going to be demands. Certainly, you'll hear on Capitol Hill for a plan for how to address the issues.
Yeah, I'm curious, Kevin, how you see this playing out on Capitol Hill, because we know the president's strategy right now, at least as described to Axios, is to be low-keying it, essentially sort of slowly dragging things out to try to build up economic pressure on the Iranians. But the reality is the Iranians, in a way, are low-keying it with us as well. Yeah. They are dragging it out. They understand the economic pressure our country is under. And the difference between the Trump administration and the Iranian regime is they are facing midterms here.
Yes.
The Iranian leaders do not have to deal with democracy at home and the voters' will and interests. And so I'm curious, when lawmakers see all of this, they hear about the outrage of families, service members doing their best for our country right now, and then also see what their voters, their constituents are dealing with at home at, say, the gas pump. I mean, are they freaking out?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly difficult line for these, particularly Republicans, to walk right now. Look, I've been asking Republicans off and on about the Iran war, the gas prices issue for months now. And I recall that just a few weeks ago, when gas prices were once again starting to skyrocket, I pressed a bunch of Republicans, like, how do you explain this? Is this the president's fault? And they were always quick to pivot to blaming someone else. That, yes, maybe it's corporations that are doing price gouging. This is Iran's war because we've been fighting them forever. The list goes on, but avoiding blaming the president by any means. But Democrats then have this very easy opening. I mean, they were already building an affordability message as part of their, campaign strategy going back since right after 2024. This bill plays right into it. I mean, it's a very easy, point A to point B. Trump starts the war, your prices are higher. It doesn't take a lot of explanation. It basically fits on a bumper sticker. And in politics, we know that, of course, short sentences do carry the day. One thing I'll add to all of this conversation, though, is Congress is now gone. They're out of town for the next month. So there's not going to be any additional war powers votes, which, by the way, have largely failed. There's not going to be a chance to, have any additional say on, okay, we need to push back on the president. Basically, we're waiting until September. We'll see where the status of the war is then, and what the status of gas prices are. Part of the bet is, at least from Democrats, is that Republicans are going to go home and face their voters over the next couple of weeks. Even if they're not holding town halls, they're going to be talking to voters.
Are most of them waiting town halls?
Well, we don't see many lined up, but at least they're going to be talking to voters because they need to court their vote. And they're probably going to hear an earful about this.
Priya, I want to know what you may be hearing from sources in context about this whole plane swap post-NATO summit. The Washington Post has this new reporting about the intelligence threat, and officials told the Post that the original intelligence came from Israel, and the CIA had doubts about it, actually calling it, quote, low confidence. At the same time, other outlets say that U.S. and Turkish intelligence said that it was credible. What are you hearing?
Yeah, that's right, Antonia. Well, it seems like a lot of the sources are saying that all of these threats were generated from Israel. But regardless of whether or not the CIA thought that it was enough for it to be, a credible, imminent threat on the president's life, you have to look at what the actions of the White House and the Secret Service were, which was, of course, to put him in this decoy plane and then fly the older Air Force One and the new Qatari model onwards to the United Kingdom and the United States. So there's a lot of questions about exactly what the threat was. We're hearing that it's a shoulder-fired missile that was the exact cause that prompted him to switch planes. Also, where that information is coming from, which we're hearing is from Israel, and whether or not the CIA thought that it rose to the level of actually, getting him to get off of the Air Force One, which is what in fact actually happened. And